Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to Ask A Steward. My name is Colleen Donovan. I'm out of Local 804 in New York City. I was also a shop steward for 2 years in Local 70 in Oakland, California, which is where a lot of the experiences I will be speaking to came from. And I'm also part of Maoist Communist Union and the Teamster Mobilized Steering Committee.
Hey everybody, my name is Jess Lister. I am almost 8-year part-timer with UPS and almost 6 years as a shop steward on the Griffin, Georgia preload. About to move to Forest Park in the next few weeks. Our building is closing. I am a steering committee member here at Teamsters Mobilize. I am a proud member of the LGBTQ plus caucus and an associate member of the Teamsters National Black Caucus. Thank you all for being here. We are excited. I wanted to invite everyone to please, if you have any shop floor issues, any internal union struggles that you maybe want some guidance on, or you just want to brainstorm, please fill out our Ask A Steward form that should be popping up right now on your screen. Yeah, you can fill out that form. We can help you. We would love to have you on this video dealing with these issues in real time, trying to sort this out together. If you don't want to be on camera, you can come on and remain anonymous. Maybe you have resolved something that you've dealt with in the past and you have experience that you want to provide that you think other people may benefit from. Please share that as well. This program relies on member participation. We don't want this to just be our stewards that are just discussing issues. Even though we've dealt with plenty of stuff, we actually want to help somebody with their issues that they're currently dealing with on their shop floor. So please reach out and come on and hang out with us on these videos. We would love that.
Absolutely well said, Jess. It will take all of us to actively deepen our knowledge, and with that, how we fight. We welcome any and all Teamsters to join us, whether you just joined yesterday or have been here for decades. Today, we will go over experiences and expectations of the grievance procedure to set a tone for the entire program we see ahead of us that will only be a success with everyone's participation, as Jess is speaking to. So for today's episode, we'll be going over 3 main things, outlining what is the grievance procedure supposed to be, what is it actually, and how do we see it play out in practice, and thirdly, why we should still engage with it and how it can be a building block to generating more militancy amongst our coworkers and leading to be able to agitate around many different issues. In TM, we ultimately want to duplicate leadership and ultimately train all of us to be a thorn in management's side. So, Jess, why don't you go ahead and take it away with point number 1 on what the grievance procedure is supposed to be?
Yes, so the grievance procedure is in place as a form of recourse when the company violates the contract. You don't have to be there very, very long to see that there are contract violations happening every single day, and oftentimes the same ones. So what our union encourages us to do is to file a grievance. And the point of that grievance is to reach a resolution. And so if the company is violating the contract, you file a grievance on that specific violation. The company either agrees to pay you whatever penalty may have been involved with that violation, or they agree to comply with the contract language, meaning that they are going to follow the contract and they're not going to further violate the contract. So the idea is that you have an issue, you file a grievance, and the issue's fixed. It's done. You move forward. There may be other issues, but you won't deal with that same issue. That's what should happen, right?
Yeah, thanks for that, Jess. So the two of us were chit-chatting amongst ourselves earlier, and we thought a great question would be that we should all be asking is, why does the grievance procedure not lead to a permanent resolution between us and the company? And there's a few main reasons. I'll start with one, that because there is a fundamental antagonism between the entire working class and the entire ruling class. There can be no world where both distinctly opposing class interests are satisfied and we live together in quote-unquote harmony. The interest of the ruling class lies primarily in creating an economic system where they become the fat cats they really are by relying on an entire laboring mass, which they exploit every day at work through the wage system. And then outside of the workplace, they've set up this entire cultural system which enforces a variety of ideas that works in their favor of creating an entire world that is pretty much dictated and centered around keeping us from overthrowing them at all costs. Quite literally. And in our view, a resolution in the interest of the working class would be to rid ourselves of these chains, which would only happen by seizing ownership over the means of production, destroying this current society, and building a new. No longer we would be operating in the world and the society as the have-nots. We say, fuck that, we've built everything in this world and we keep it running. The reality is, in order for the bourgeoisie to be who they are, they do rely on us as we currently are. In the way we can see how UPS makes $14 billion profits, but we're only getting a meager starting wage of $21. And this is only one tiny aspect of how they maintain their dictatorship over us. But we don't need them. For example, in a classic union song, Solidarity, which Jess has done with her coworkers when they stretch in the morning, one line says, all the world that's owned by idle drones is ours and ours alone. We have laid the wide foundation, built it skyward stone by stone. It is ours not to slave in, but to master and to own, while the union makes us strong. The related question is, if we see reality along these class lines, we know that the boss can't really be the boss without his foot on our neck. And with keeping our people bleeding on the job, in the streets, through human trafficking, imperialist wars, bloodshed, and so on, then there fundamentally isn't any room for resolutions in the favor of our true interests as the working class. So that's why in Teamster Mobilize, in our statement, we call for a worker-led country, and we stand against all class collaboration that we see within the union. There is no equal footing or equal exchange between us and the company, and that starts the second we step foot on the grounds. It's like when management asks for respect when they're kicking us when we're already down. You want to talk respect? Let's talk about exploitation and us doing the work of 2 to 4 people and getting paid dog shit. And you're taking a day of work away from us because I'm 5 minutes late? All in all, the company desperately needs us to not have any resolutions with them. So Jess is now going to speak about the culture and underlying worldview and political stand that is being put forth when our union continues to settle under the guise of company will comply.
Yeah, so when they go into these grievance hearings, usually the first step is between the local steward and that local center manager. So it usually takes place right in your home building, and that is usually called a local level hearing. The union even kind of tells you to expect that there's some give and take. You go in there and compromise, you go in there and you actually negotiate a settlement. Even though we've already negotiated the terms of our contract, it's in black and white, we go in there again and further negotiate down in the company's favor. And so there are some things that are in the contract that when there's a violation, you get a monetary penalty, meaning you get a check, you get money. Supervisors working, you get money for that. If they have paid you incorrectly, there is a penalty involved because it technically always takes them quite some time to sort that out. When you file that grievance, they only have 2 days to get you paid correctly with that check in your hand. They hardly ever do that. So penalties start accumulating every week that they don't have you made whole. For drivers, there's like 9-5 penalties when they work drivers too long of hours and they've already signed the 9-5 list. So there's a handful of things that you can actually get a monetary penalty for. And then there are a ton of things in our contract that don't have a penalty. It is just that you're going in there trying to get them to follow the language of the contract. And many times the company wants to settle as company will comply, which means that they're agreeing to follow the contract. Our union settles for company will comply over and over and over again. The company takes advantage of that settlement just to resolve the grievance and be done with it. They don't give that settlement because they actually have an intention of following the contract. They absolutely do not intend to follow the contract. They walk all over our contract because there is basically zero consequences to them when they don't. If
Mhm.
supervisors work and they have to cut you a check, they don't care about cutting you a check. They don't care about giving you a couple $1,000s. Nobody's getting big checks for $100,000, $200,000. It's pennies to them. They have a whole, as part of their doing business, they have a whole bank account basically just sitting there to pay out all these penalties. They know it, it's expected, they don't care. It's still cheaper for them to pay these penalties and walk all over the contract. So to them, that really isn't a consequence. It is something that the member will get in return. So it's better than nothing, but it's not enough to make the company follow the contract. And when we go in and we settle as company will comply, especially when we do it repeatedly on the same issue, I feel like it's really a slap in the face to the rank and file members that are filing these grievances because they're looking for a real resolution. They're not looking for company will comply, which is something that I say the company takes and they wipe their ass with. It doesn't really improve our working conditions, and it's not something that we should settle for, in my opinion. Harassment, retaliation, intimidation, that's something that almost every single rank and file UPSer has dealt with. Even your least confrontational people that break their backs in there, some of the fastest, hardest working people in there, keep their head down. These people are still harassed and intimidated on a constant basis. So no matter who you are, no matter how much you try to keep your head down, you're going to have this stuff happen to you eventually. So it's really great practice to know not if this happens to me, when this happens to me, how am I going to deal with it, and what can I expect during that process?
Exactly. So many great points here, Jess. One, the connection between how inevitable retaliation we face serves two purposes. One, it literally does keep us down, but two, such retaliation coming from such basic stands like enforcing our contract, which honestly isn't even that radical of a stand because wasn't UPS and IBT supposedly agreeing to this entire set of rules to follow? This proves that the retaliation is only being done on the basis that our potential to eventually seize genuine political power, which would result in an end to their control, is that much of a legitimate threat to them. And I'm talking big scale here, like how Carol Tomei is also on the board of Verizon, and UPS has a whole shit ton of investors like BlackRock, Vanguard, Bank of America, JP Morgan. I'm talking about the entire ruling class, not just your average part-time supervisor who, even though they do play a big role as being our immediate disciplinary, but the basic shared interest that we have as an entire class also really comes through in your remarks, Jess, which I think are strong. On the point about this tired old dog and pony show, the union leadership continues to talk out of both sides of their mouth, begging for more grievances to be filed, and it's the best option for us, while in Local 804, over 3,800 grievances were backlogged as of May 2025. And they tell us to be grateful, to be so thankful for them, that they're throwing the entire kitchen sink at the company at arbitration and panel and hearings, when our grievances that are supposed to be a shoo-in are getting denied. Yet, do we wait another year plus for some money? And it's like, hold up, wait. So you're telling me UPS again didn't listen and is dragging out basic things we have clear evidence for, and they've been doing this since the early 1900s and at least the entire 25-year tenure of your role as a BA? Let's lay it out bare, real quick and simple. We know the company is shit. The fact we have a union in the first place to handle known attacks against the worker implies this stuff will happen. The fact we need a union for basic things like pensions, healthcare, insurance show that the conditions for the working class more broadly in the US is rigged against us. All the writing is already on the wall for us. So it's time for the end of closed-door contract bargaining, the end of backroom deals. The union leadership from the international all the way to the locals mystify the entire resolution process by telling us that this is all that is possible, which is a lie, and that we as an entire body are left with this foggy images of they've done everything they can, they fought like hell for us. So this is why we really have to see that it's time for us to educate ourselves and become conscious deciders and taking powerful stance that we take despite the current conditions that Jess and I are evaluating here. Simply put, the union is not a service, even though right now it functions like one, and many see it that way, as some external thing that's beyond us. It exists simply because of us and our role in production and society overall. And the fact that there's even business agents who can rack up like 6-figure salaries is because of us. And it's time we take it back in our own hands and play a determining role in what sort of strategy and tactics we use against the bosses. And stop being passive observers in the union and getting actively preyed and leached upon. We have to change ourselves as an entire class. We're the only ones who can do this, and we must. So with that, let's transition, Jess, to why we still engage in the grievance procedure and how we can build up worker militancy through some partial or small victories, and how we have wielded the service model into actually a collective effort with coworkers and as a tool for agitation.
You know, unfortunately, labor has taken many, many concessions over the years, and we have very limited power. So it's important to talk about that, discuss how that handcuffs us, but what little power we do have, of course, we want to utilize that. What is the other option? To do nothing? I mean, that's not an answer. That's never an answer. We always want to fight back against injustices. And, you know, sometimes your union leadership will encourage you, you know, don't get upset on the shop floor, don't get heated, don't get confrontational, just file your grievance. I actually don't believe in quietly filing your grievance. I stand up to management loudly and proudly where my whole shop floor sees that. And they love it. I mean, every time I have to get into it with management, I always have people telling me, like, they chose the right one. We have the right steward. Like, I will follow you to the end of this earth, like, ride or die. Like, my people love that I have their back and that I'm not afraid to stand up for any one of them. I don't just stand up for myself. I advocate for everybody on my shop floor. And that empowers them. They may not stand up as vocally as me, but that gives them power to not be afraid to use their stop button when the pace is too fast and they can't keep up, or when there's an overweight on the belt. Because they know even if they don't stand up and say something, if a supervisor questions them, I'm going to have their back. So they know that there's somebody standing right beside them that's going to have their back. And in my opinion, you need both. You need to vocally stand up for yourself and your coworkers and file the grievance. Because sometimes, like Colleen mentioned earlier, just being a thorn in their side is going to make changes on your shop floor. I've seen that myself. Everybody on my floor has seen that. There's times in the past where supervisors didn't want to call break on time. You have to call break by the end of the third hour. That is by the contract. In my building, we're not working 1 minute past break time. When it's break time, the supervisors have about 5 seconds to call it, or the members are going to shut the belt off and call break time. And I've had to do that in the past and get into it with the supervisors over that. And now you will see our supervisor at the top of the belt looking at his watch at 6:59 because he knows he's going to call it at 7 o'clock. Because the last thing he wants is for the members to have to call their own break, because that makes him look bad. You know, and that was because we shut the belt off and we walked off at break time. That wasn't because somebody quietly filed a grievance and a resolution was reached 6 months later. That was advocating in real time. So you need both to be effective, and things that you can do collectively as a group instead of just one person filing on supervisors working. Let your most senior person file and let everybody sign on to those grievances. That's going to encourage people, one, to want to fight. Two, they're going to get paid. Three, they're probably going to take notes themselves, right? Of a supervisor that they saw working in their area. They're going to write that down or save that in their phone, and they're going to send you that after the sort. So you're getting all these notes from multiple people telling you what supervisor was working, where they were working, what time, what they were doing. So instead of one or two people seeing this happen, you have 10, 15 people sending you this information. So you have that many more witnesses, that many more details to put on your grievance. And you can take that grievance money and you can split it with everybody that participated. And so everybody wins, right? Because when a supervisor works, they're taking work away from your whole sort, not just one or two people. Because if those same amount of rank and file workers were doing that work, everybody would have been on the clock an extra 20, 30 minutes. Nobody really wants to be there any longer than we have to. Most of us agree that it's a shithole, right? Yep. But we want to do our work. That is our work. That is Teamster work. We're going to do it at a safe pace. And we don't want supervisors stealing our work because they're stealing our money. So stuff like that you can team up on and get everybody involved. And that definitely raises member involvement, and it spurs further change, right? So like, well, hey, can we do something about this as a group? So it really only takes you getting the group involved in one thing, and then that same group of folks is interested in getting involved in more and more things.
In Oakland, we also had a soup working grievance network with where we had someone posted on each area, and we accumulated as many instances as we could in a 45-day window, which was in our supplemental how much time you have for the grievance to still be honored. And in order to prove the point of just how normalized this was, and that a reflection of systematic understaffing, and that there really was no justification for layoffs that were happening even outside of peak season, we were able to illustrate that by really dragging it out as long as we could with 52 instances with a total of 19 different soups. So that's happening more than once, obviously, every single day. And when we finally won some partial settlements, which did take a while, they accused us of liars, we went through a whole sort of gauntlet. We used that money to do a building-wide breakfast party after preload with little exposés that every worker received explaining the bigger picture. We had a poster saying sponsored by Article 3, Section 7 and Article 40, Section 3. And when the bosses were trying to force everyone to clock out early, we exclaimed, "Remember, all this food came from them stealing our work." And management took our trifold poster. They told us we were going to start making people believe that the soups don't like us. And it's like, please, you already make that known. And it's a classic maneuver of them trying to break us down from empowering others and setting an example out of us. But, it didn't work.
Up, the more management is going to slip up as well. Management actually cannot take any kind of materials. That is what is considered protected union activity. And that's actually a violation of the National Labor Relations Board. So you can bring labor board charges against the company because they acted like a child and stomped their feet and tried to take your stuff. And if anybody ever physically takes something from your hand, that goes beyond an NLRB charge, and you need to file a police report. One of our fellow stewards, Yvette Avery in 728, she actually had a center manager snatch her clipboard. And she called the police right then and there, and she filed a police report against him. You cannot do that. Just because you're at work does not mean people can treat you any kind of way. When this stuff starts ramping up, you get under their skin, they're going to make even more mistakes. So continue to make those exposures and use the channels we have.
And other collective grievances that we did as an entire building included a push for a 45-cent shift differential, which was a case that was continually getting deadlocked. It was brought to national. But however, at the building level, at our local hearing, which is usually just the stewards, we stormed the meeting with almost like a dozen workers that even shocked our union principal officer. And these experiences do add up. Even if we're met with little change from the bosses or the company's end, this does have a ripple effect with the attitudes that we all bring with us to work, as Jess said earlier. When our local hearings weren't happening every month, as they contractually are supposed to, we got a petition going in the parking lot as stewards, bringing the entire workforce on board. And within less than a few hours, we got a call from our principal officer saying that they'd start back up and we'd have one later in the week. So obviously word got around before we could even deliver it, which just goes to show actually what sort of power and results we can have just through collective action besides these like bureaucratic meant to fail sort of systems that are in front of us. And when we were able to, we also fought tooth and nail to expose our union when our entire building was losing a shift, and our change of ops article 48 was just being stomped all over, to the point where we were able to really sort of force our principal officer to come have a meeting with the entire workforce. And he did exclaim that, you know what, guys, it doesn't even matter how many days notice you get, or if any. So to that, I stood up and asked the entire room, like, what do we all think about that? And I publicly got cussed out by my principal officer. But this actually worked in our favor versus his. People were appalled and pissed off that the contract language, like Jess said earlier, makes better use as toilet paper to the boss's ass. So there's more to break down here with every single instance, and there's several other experiences that I'm intentionally withholding because we just don't have time. But this is all just to start to share some background and the orientation that Jess, myself, and the other stewards who are be involved in the show are coming from. And so with all that being said, we don't want to be sitting here talking over everything we've seen and done just amongst the two of us. We already work closely together in the steering committee every single week. We're here calling out to all our Teamsters, regardless of industry, that we need all of us who see the basis to root out internal divisions and boss-like ideas in politics, which are stamped directly onto us through our role in society. But we say, let's really creatively try and work together to sharpen ourselves and deal with all the bullshit that's immediately in front of us, head on, shoulder to shoulder. So we will all be experiencing coming from different situations. Our external conditions vary greatly, but through kind of collecting and pooling together all those differences, again, that's only how we become a stronger force. And as TM, we want to remind you that we see the importance to fight nationally as well, including our efforts like leading the No Vote campaign for the 2023 contract, writing resolutions including demanding a permanent ceasefire of the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and for the IBT to reveal all their spendings, and their current relationship with the IDF, because they are the biggest buyer and seller of Israeli war bonds, which is a true fact. And right now we are currently rallying all Teamsters across all industries around a set of demands for the 2026 IBT election for the presidential seat, including abolishing all pay tiers, ending the part-time job classification, removal of the no strike clause, which would be huge and pertains to everything we've been talking about today, including demands around automation and more. So please check it out and join us in carrying forward the light in struggle and in solidarity.
Great closing remarks, Colleen.
Never, never, never keep us down. Take a cheap, light frame or steel bud.